I knew I was done the moment Lana called my entire team a luxury we can't afford during a transition quarter. Not even 5 minutes into the Monday morning all hands, and I already felt like I was watching my own obituary being drafted in real time, just without the courtesy of flowers or a damn fruit basket. She was on screen from the San Mateo office, that permanent smirk plastered on her face, like someone who thought smugness counted as strategic leadership. Her hair was too perfect for someone in charge of innovation, and her voice had that HR slick syrup tone they all learn in executive boot camps, fake empathy with a hint of threat. She clicked to a slide titled Alignment Directives for Future-Facing Teams and said we'd be moving to full-time, on-site collaboration starting next week. No warning, no discussion, just that's the culture now. People stared, I blinked. Because for 3 straight quarters, my logistics AI pilot had outperformed even our best sales projections, and I did most of that from my basement office wearing a robe and cat-themed slippers. But apparently results now mattered less than visibility. Then came the real kicker. All R&D prototypes and early-stage concepts, she said, must be logged in the shared internal repository. Full source files, technical notebooks, timestamps. My office will be reviewing all origin points for patent filing consolidation, effective immediately. That's when I leaned back in my chair and felt my molars grind. Because that policy wasn't about collaboration, it was about theft. Quiet, corporate, paper trail cleansed theft. And if you think that sounds dramatic, you've never had a VP slide into your org from a rival company with an NDA loophole and a memory stick full of ambition. Anyway, before I go on, quick thing. I know 90% of y'all listen to these stories while doing dishes or scrolling TikTok on the toilet, and that's fine. But if you're enjoying this ride, hit that like button and tap subscribe. Helps more than you know. Seriously, keeps the coffee pot running and the legal bills paid. Back to Lana. I unmuted, calmly. Can I get clarification on whether this applies to projects developed outside of work hours? She smiled that shark smile. Judith, if you're developing solutions relevant to Alaric's systems roadmap, we assume it's within our scope. I asked, even if no Alaric's equipment, time, or team members were used. She laughed, God help me, she laughed. If you don't like the new policies, Judith, you can just resign and go. The call went silent. Even my junior dev, Marcus, who still types with 2 fingers, stopped mid-keystroke. And me, I smiled, thanks for the exit strategy. I closed my laptop, unplugged my second monitor, took a long, slow breath that smelled faintly of betrayal and vanilla coffee creamer. I walked out of that building like I was headed to brunch. No scene, no desk banging, just a box in my arms and a 1,000-mile stare. People whispered. Darla, my mentee, followed me to the elevator. Judith, what's happening? Where are you going? I looked at her, steady as concrete. Stay, observe. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I didn't even slam the exit door, though God knows I wanted to leave a crack in the drywall for the janitor to ask about later. Instead, I walked out to my car, popped the trunk, and placed my box next to a pre-packed envelope marked to General Counsel Alaric Systems. Stamped, sealed, postmarked. Inside, a declaration, not resignation, documentation. Proof that the AI-driven logistics engine they were prepping for next year's product launch was mine, and not just metaphorically. Literally, see, I'd been building it outside the scope of my contract. Nights, weekends, my own hardware, my own funds, with witnesses. With digital trails so pristine a toddler could follow them to court. They thought I'd cave, that I'd slink off like a good little team player with bruised feelings and a half-finished LinkedIn post. But I don't bruise easy. I build quietly. And when you try to steal what I've built, I don't fight. I file. I didn't take much. Just the stuff that was actually mine. A ceramic mug shaped like a penguin, 2 notebooks filled with half-formed ideas and passive-aggressive doodles of corporate buzzwords, and a little wooden plaque Darla had made last year that said Queen of Workarounds. I left the monitor, left the mouse, even left my ergonomic keyboard, the one I'd personally bought because the company issued one clicked like a tap-dancing termite on Adderall. Let Lana keep it all. She'd need it for the fire she was about to walk into. No tears, no farewell Slack message, no sad office walk-around pretending we were all gonna miss each other. Just me, quietly slipping that envelope into the outgoing mail tray on the HR floor. White, standard issue, sealed tighter than a nun at a biker rally. The label said to General Counsel, that's all, but what was inside, well, that was the fuse. Darla caught up to me by the front doors, her face pale and blinking like she was buffering. Are you really leaving? I looked at her, not unkindly, just. Honestly, stay, observe. She opened her mouth to argue, closed it again. I saw it in her eyes, confusion, fear, maybe a little hope. She wasn't dumb. She'd seen how fast things had shifted since Lana slithered in. She'd watched the way credits were rewritten, team leads reassigned, how the Friday lunch budget suddenly got funneled into quarterly synergy reports. Darla had potential, but she still thought the system could be fixed from the inside. I didn't, not anymore. The elevator opened. I stepped in. She stayed behind, chewing her lip like maybe she was the one being abandoned. The doors shut before I could say anything else. Outside, the sun was blinding. The parking lot smelled like scorched rubber and corporate decay. I opened my trunk, placed the box next to the backup envelope. Yes, I had another one, already stamped and addressed because paranoia is just experience with better branding, and got behind the wheel. I didn't head home. I drove straight to Oakway Commons, a coworking space sandwiched between a dentist's office and a vape shop that looked like it sold regrets. It wasn't glamorous, but it had two things I needed: anonymity and a notary named Phil who didn't ask questions as long as the paperwork was neat and the coffee was hot. Phil greeted me with a nod, slid my notarization papers across the glass countertop, and said, "Looks like someone's got a big day." I said, "Let's make it official." 3 signature confirmations, 2 timestamp verifications, 1 USB flash drive upload into the encrypted filing system we'd prearranged last month. Phil dropped it all into a locked case like he was handling something radioactive. Technically, he was, because what I just filed were 3 provisional patent declarations: AI-based predictive routing, load balancing matrix refinements, and something I called the Ghost Protocol, an invisible backend logic engine that would have made Alarix's supply chain optimization project the crown jewel of their next product cycle. Would have, because now, those designs were mine, and not just in theory. Legally, logically, tactically. The documentation trail was longer than a CVS receipt and twice as painful for whoever had to read it. I had built it on my own time, using my own devices, my own money, and this part was key, entirely outside the scope of my Alarix contract. I even used open-source base code and kept detailed logs showing my progression, from napkin sketch to working prototype. The few times I talked it out loud, I did it at local meetups or with friends unrelated to work. Witnesses, timestamps, metadata, backups. And then there was the cherry on top: the NDA clause Lana had streamlined during her first week, which, ironically, loosened their claim over pre-existing intellectual property developed by employees not under active contract obligations. In her quest to consolidate power, she'd left a crack in the wall. I just widened it. As I left Oakway Commons, my phone buzzed. A message from Darla. "Lana just asked if you'd left for lunch." I didn't reply. I drove to the lake, parked under a tree, and watched ducks fight over a bagel chunk like it was a stock option. I wasn't mad. Not anymore. I was surgical. A decade of quiet contributions, of fixing other people's code, of making bad ideas marketable and saving execs from their own incompetence. I'd been invisible. Now I was the ghost in their machine. And soon they'd realize the system they relied on had just walked out the door. The first version of the algorithm was sketched on a napkin at a diner in Kent, right next to a half-eaten stack of pancakes, and a waitress named Sherry who kept refilling my coffee without asking. It wasn't elegant, just loops and nodes and arrows scribbled in black ink, but it was the moment I stopped being an employee and started being something else entirely: a builder no longer interested in being robbed. That was 11 months before Lana ever stepped foot in Alarix Systems. 11 months before she'd start stripping my name off slide decks and pretending team-based ideation meant stealing credit from the quiet ones. I hadn't started building it out of spite. I'd started because I saw the writing on the wall. Hell, I'd painted the damn wall. The company wanted speed, not precision. Hype, not substance. My proposal for a predictive routing engine that adjusted in real time based on historical delivery patterns and environmental disruptions. Too in the weeds, they said. Too complex for sales to understand, so they shelved it. I didn't. I went home, opened my personal laptop, different machine, different network, no trace of Alarix, and started building. Line by line, logic loop by logic loop, I stitched together something that worked. Quietly, cleanly, legally. Every Git commit had a timestamp. Every backup uploaded to encrypted storage. I even emailed digest logs to myself weekly, using a personal account registered to a name variation I'd used in grad school. And once a month, I met with an old college friend, Ravi, now an adjunct professor at a community college, to walk through the progress. He signed off as a third-party witness on progress forms I kept notarized. Paranoid? Maybe. But in this world, paranoia is just foresight wearing work boots. 6 months in, the routing algorithm was no longer just a theory. It was a functioning skeleton. I tested it against mock data pulled from open-source shipping datasets. The results were so efficient they made Alarix's existing logistics framework look like a kid playing with Legos blindfolded. So I scheduled a meeting, not with my manager, not with my director, with someone outside the glass box, Eliza Trent, no-nonsense IP attorney who used to work with mid-tier defense contractors and looked like she'd gone 10 rounds with 4 different patent trolls before lunch. I laid out everything: logs, backups, timestamps, offsite development proof, even a video of me building a core module with a time and date watermark on the screen and a local radio station playing in the background. Eliza didn't blink. "These are yours," she said. No question. She drafted the filings: 3 separate provisional patent applications, the routing optimization engine, the fallback redundancy logic that triggered based on delivery anomalies, a dynamic resource balancing system I called Ghost Protocol because it moved data so silently even sysadmins would miss it, filed under my name, my personal name, no corporate ties, no ambiguous language that might let Alaric sneak in through a backdoor. Eliza triple-checked every clause, and just to be sure, we timestamped the filings through a separate, independent archival network, legally overkill, but emotionally satisfying. I didn't tell anyone at work. Why would I? It wasn't for them. Then Lana arrived, like a cheetah in a boardroom full of mice, thinking speed and power made her untouchable. She announced Alarix would soon launch a new AI-driven logistics intelligence suite, and I nearly choked on my lunch. They were using my foundation, not just inspired by, built on. And what they didn't know, what no one in that tower of recycled buzzwords and ego inflation knew, was that the moment they hit compile on the demo version, they'd already stepped onto a legal landmine. Because every core dependency in that code, every logic sequence, every backbone decision tree that made it intelligent, was now protected. By law, not because I was vengeful, because I'd lived through enough office betrayals to know that silence only protects the thief. So I stopped being silent. I became precise. And precision, my friends, cuts deeper than rage ever could. They called it Project Apex, which already made me want to gag. As if slapping a dramatic name on a bundle of half-understood algorithms could turn duct tape into a Tesla. Lana stood up at the all-hands that Friday and declared with her trademark breathless enthusiasm, "Be unveiling Apex at the Midwestern Tech Frontier Summit. This is our moonshot. Moonshot, right." I watched the clip of that meeting later, someone having sneakily recorded it and sent it to me with the caption, "Guess who thinks she invented oxygen?" Apex was supposed to be the crown jewel. A next-gen logistics intelligence engine that would predict delivery disruptions, self-heal backend failures, and optimize entire networks on the fly. Basically, what I'd been building. Only now, duct taped together by a team that didn't know which parts I had intentionally never documented. Because here's the dirty little truth about real innovation. Not everything lives in Git. Sometimes the most crucial pieces live in your head, in shorthand notes on legal pads, or in 5-line Python scripts you never commit because you know exactly how they'll be stolen if you do. Lana didn't know that. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. The summit was 3 weeks away. Her team started scrambling, late nights, Slack threads on fire, frantic requests for vendor credentials no one could locate because I had them memorized, not saved. One junior dev named Byron, sweet kid, used to ask if I'd proofread his code comments, flagged something weird on the second Friday of the sprint. "This routing module," he said in a thread, "has a Git origin that predates the Apex repo by 4 months. Looks like it was forked from a sandbox repo before the integration policy even existed." Silence. He followed up, "Should I rewrite from scratch, just to be safe?" Lana's reply came 18 minutes later. "We're under deadline. Keep moving. Deadlines over details. Always." Byron DM'd a friend of mine 2 days later, asking quietly if anyone had seen the original documentation. He said half the function calls weren't returning expected outputs, and some of the backend balancing protocols were just stubs, placeholders, empty code meant to be filled in later. Except I hadn't left placeholders. I'd removed the real logic and replaced it with shell functions before I left, not maliciously, just as a safeguard. Think of it like locking your front door before quitting a job where your boss once hinted they might repurpose your personal laptop. Meanwhile, internal comms kept pumping out bright, chirpy messages like Apex, bold, brilliant, built for the future. They scheduled mock press interviews. PR drafted taglines about next-level disruption. I heard someone even ordered custom lanyards with the Apex logo and a QR code that didn't go anywhere yet. And still, under the surface, the code base was bleeding. Automated test coverage dropped. Delivery simulations buckled under synthetic stress loads. They tried reassigning tasks to new contractors, but nobody could reverse engineer the logic engine without hitting conflicts. Then came the whisper, just one whisper. A message forwarded to me anonymously from someone inside the data team. "Hey, wasn't this part of Judith's sandbox project? Thought it was still an independent dev." No one said it publicly. Not yet. But the doubt had been seeded. Lana, to her credit, kept her smile on. She stood in meetings talking about phase convergence and AI-native synergies like someone who'd memorized a word cloud and mistook it for a blueprint. She brushed off every concern with a dismissive wave, claiming this is how innovation feels, messy but magical. It didn't feel magical. It felt like a bomb counting down, one missed test case at a time. But outside that building, no one knew. The summit organizers posted about Alarix's upcoming unveiling like it was the second coming of sliced bread. Investors started sniffing around. Recruiters began watching LinkedIn activity like hawks. Everyone wanted in, and the one person who could have told them the truth had left the building with a smile and a sealed envelope. The tension was growing, but the real show hadn't even started. It started with a phone call to legal that nobody took seriously at first. Karen from General Counsel forwarded it to a paralegal with a shrug and a subject line that read, "Patent drama. Can someone look?" No one raised alarms. No one broke a sweat, because in their minds I was still just Judith from R&D. Reliable, introverted, non-threatening Judith, who brought lemon bars to staff birthdays and took notes during meetings no one else bothered to attend. The cease and desist came on Alaric's letterhead, but not theirs, mine. It landed in the GC's inbox at 7:42 a.m. on a Monday, filed by Eliza Trent, my IP attorney, with all the warmth of a guillotine drop. The subject line read, "Immediate halt of infringing activity patent interference notification, case ID, hash 548-92J." It was 6 pages long, single-spaced, citing specific components of the Apex platform that directly overlapped with provisional filings under my name. She even included annotated screenshots of the GitHub commits from Alaric's demo repo and timestamp comparisons with my notarized submissions. It wasn't vague. It wasn't a warning shot. It was legal carpet bombing. By 10 o'clock a.m., Lana had been pulled into a conference room with 2 attorneys and a project liaison from product. I was told she laughed, actually laughed, and said she's bluffing. Provisional patents don't mean anything until they're finalized. They're just placeholders, bless her heart. Because right about then, the second letter arrived. Straight from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. It confirmed that 3 provisional patents filed under Judith A. Harlow had been formally logged and accepted as of 5 weeks prior. Patent interference statutes were now in effect under Title 35. Any continued use, demonstration, or marketing of the protected concepts, especially in a for-profit context, would constitute willful infringement. That part mattered. Willful is legal dynamite. It meant they couldn't play ignorance anymore. It meant damages could triple. The GC's tone shifted from eye rolls to grim silence. Emails flew like confetti in a wind tunnel. The CTO's assistant accidentally CC'd half the engineering team on a message that said, "What the hell do you mean we can't use our own code?" Followed immediately by a please delete retraction. One of the UX designers posted a panicked thread in a private Slack channel. "If Judith filed this before the Apex repo went live, are we totally screwed?" Someone replied with a gif of a dumpster fire on wheels. But the real panic didn't hit until they traced the back-end architecture of Apex and realized it wasn't just inspired by my routing system, it depended on it. The logic tree, the real-time balancing triggers, even the fault detection loops, they weren't just similar. They were identical because they were mine. There was no in-house variation, no accidental overlap. Apex was my work, gusset up with a new name and rebranded for an audience that had no idea it was built on someone else's blueprints. Someone who'd been careful, patient, quiet, until now. Lana doubled down. She stormed into an emergency stand-up and said, "This is a scare tactic. We're not pulling anything. The summit is in 10 days. We've already booked the booth. PR's involved. She's not going to tank her own career over a technicality." Oh, Lana, you thought it was a game. But I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't even mad anymore. I was strategic, and I had just flipped the switch. Over the next 48 hours, a quiet war erupted inside Alaric's. Legal pulled engineering files. Product halted demo prep. The COO demanded a full audit of Apex's codebase. 2 contractors quit outright, saying they didn't want to get dragged into an IP lawsuit. And someone, probably Byron, leaked part of the cease and desist letter to a tech forum under a burner account. The headline the next morning, "Ex-engineer slaps employer with patent interference warning." Summit demo in jeopardy. It hadn't gone public yet, but the story was breathing, circulating, and inside Alaric's, the walls had started to creak, because the woman they pushed out wasn't just bluffing. She'd already built the case. Now, she was watching them walk right into it. The air at the Midwestern Tech Frontier Summit smelled like burnt espresso and desperation. Lana arrived at the convention center in a tailored blazer the color of overconfidence and heels that clicked like punctuation marks. Her entourage, 3 engineers, 2 marketers, and 1 poor intern named Celeste, trailed behind her like ducklings following a freight train. They wheeled in branded banners, tote bags, lanyards, and a demo rig preloaded with the Apex platform. Booth hash 207 was theirs. Center row. Right across from 2 competitors who'd already posted teaser videos about predictive fleet optimization, one of the same fields Apex was supposedly going to revolutionize. The cease and desist? Ignored. The provisional patent confirmation? Brushed aside. The internal emails begging for caution? Dismissed. Because Lana had a mantra, and she kept saying it like an incantation. The patents are provisional. They mean nothing. She said it in the elevator. She said it during the setup. She even said it twice while getting mic'd for the livestream panel where she'd be debuting Apex in front of investors, journalists, and half the Midwestern logistics tech scene. Inside the Alaric's booth, the tension could have sliced through steel. The demo laptop was connected to a secondary monitor. 2 techs hovered near it, doing last-minute checks, trying not to sweat through their polos. Byron looked like he hadn't slept in days. The code had been partially rewritten in a rush, logic functions scrambled to avoid triggering any direct conflict with my filings. But it was like trying to duct tape a dam with wet receipts. "Everything ready?" Lana asked, smiling too wide, her voice just a pitch too high. One of the contractors gave a thumbs up without looking her in the eye. The lights dimmed for the product showcase panel. Corporate MC introduced Lana as one of the most forward-thinking voices in logistics innovation today, and I swear, even the camera guy looked confused. She walked up to the podium, gave her pitch. It was slick, full of buzzwords and vague promises. She gestured toward the screen, and now she beamed, "We'll show you how Apex is changing the game live." The audience clapped. The lights focused on the screen, and for about 20 seconds it worked. The map loaded. The simulated shipments began to auto-route. Numbers danced, routes blinked. Applause started to build, then the engine buckled. The screen froze. A red warning popped up, unhandled exception, null logic route reference. Byron lunged toward the laptop, hands flying across the keyboard, but it was too late. The simulation spiraled. Shipment ETA fields turned to zeros. The dynamic routing engine collapsed. The fallback logic kicked in and failed, because the fallback logic was never there. It had never been there, because I had removed it months ago. One of the engineers muttered, "Why is the balancing script empty?" And then, loud enough for 3 rows to hear, a third-party contractor stepped forward and said what no one else dared. "We couldn't legally use the original code. It's flagged for IP conflict." Dead. Silence. On stage, Lana froze. She tried to speak, and cleared her throat and gestured to the screen like maybe wiggling her fingers would magically fix the crash. The coup, standing behind the booth wall, leaned in and whispered into her headset, "We can't go live with this." She didn't respond. She couldn't. Her eyes darted across the audience, investors scribbling notes, competitors smirking, a regional tech journalist already typing something on his iPad. A full minute passed before she finally said, voice cracking just slightly, "Looks like we're having some technical difficulties." The audience clapped politely, the way you do when someone forgets their lines in a high school play. Backstage, the Alarix team scrambled to unplug the rig. Byron yanked the HDMI cable like it had personally betrayed him. The intern cried in a bathroom stall 20 minutes later, overheard whispering, "I think I just watched a career implode." Meanwhile, Lana paced, tight circles, staring at her phone like the screen would offer a lifeline. It didn't. Her confidence was cracking. Her armor, PR polish, ego, denial was starting to peel because she hadn't just ignored the warnings. She'd built her entire public relaunch on top of stolen bones, and now those bones were crumbling. The product wasn't viable. The audience wasn't impressed, and the only person who could have stopped the collapse wasn't there. She was watching from across town. She wasn't bluffing. The debrief room was cold, not temperature-wise, just cold in that sterile corporate way. Windowless, fluorescent beige walls pretending to be modern. The kind of room where careers don't end in fire but in carefully worded memos and HR disclaimers. Lana sat at the center of the U-shaped table, flanked by the COO and 2 board members who'd flown in for the summit. Her phone was face down. Her voice, for the first time since she arrived at Alarix, was absent. They didn't even give her a coffee. The COO opened the session with a forced throat clear and mumbled something about navigating unexpected friction. No one laughed. Byron wasn't invited. Neither were the engineers. This was no longer about innovation or product cycles. This was now about liability. 3 minutes into the meeting, the door opened, and in walked Eliza Trent, my attorney, like a storm in a tailored black blazer. She didn't ask permission. She didn't introduce herself. She just walked straight to the head of the table, set a thick manila envelope in front of General Counsel Karen, and said, "Calm as sunrise, Judith Harlow sends her regards." Karen, confused, looked to the board for guidance. The older one with the tortoiseshell glasses gave a tiny nod. Eliza took a step back and crossed her arms. Karen opened the envelope. First, a printed spreadsheet of logs, commits, backups, sync reports, all with metadata confirming origin, timestamp, and development device IDs. Every line of code Lana had claimed belonged to Apex had been written months earlier by me, on a machine registered to my name outside Alarix's network. Second, a notarized affidavit from Ravi, my witness. Dated, stamped, clear. Third, a small USB drive labeled Audio January 17 R&D Reorg. Karen plugged it into her laptop, pressed play, and there it was, Lana's voice, crisp and undeniable. "If you don't like the new policies, Judith, you can just resign and go. A beat, you'll be fine. Honestly, your stuff is probably too technical for Apex anyway." A longer pause followed by a chuckle. "Once it's in the system, it's ours. That's how it works." The room went still. Liza let the silence sit. Let it marinate. Then she said, because Miss Harlow left Alarix Systems before project submission, and because her work was done independently, with no use of company time, equipment, or collaboration, and because she retained third-party witnesses and documented her development trail meticulously, Alarix holds no claim, no rebuttal. Karen shut the laptop slowly, like it might explode. The older board member turned to Lana. His voice was low, but the words cut like wire. "Did you verify any of this before announcing Apex?" Lana opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The COO stared down at the table. One of the board members leaned back, exhaled through his nose like someone trying not to say, "I told you so." Eliza reached into her bag and handed Karen a single-page summary. It was a legal statement of acknowledgement and requested retraction. Alarix's agreement to cease all use of the disputed systems, refrain from referencing Apex in marketing materials, and release a public clarification. There was a blank signature line. Karen didn't ask questions, she just set the page in front of the board. No one defended Lana, no one argued, they just stared, because the truth wasn't fuzzy anymore. It wasn't debatable or wrapped in interpretation. It was filed, time-stamped, admitted to on record. Now they were caught. By a woman they thought was dispensable. A woman who didn't fight with emails or pleadings or escalations. A woman who said, thanks for the exit strategy and left, then came back with a legal kill shot tucked in an envelope. Lana didn't speak for the rest of the meeting. She just sat there, silent, pale, and very, very small. They didn't even call her in. The board convened in the main conference suite at 9 a.m. sharp the next morning. Lana's name wasn't on the invite list. Her office door remained shut, her chair conspicuously empty, and her Outlook calendar went dark. She was still in the building, apparently, sitting somewhere down in HR with a lawyer and a coffee she wasn't drinking. But upstairs, decisions were being made. The first was simple. Apex was dead, not rebranded, not shelved, dead. A quiet bullet to the temple, executed by unanimous vote. The board didn't even pretend to salvage it. There were too many eyes now, investors, journalists, competitors, waiting to pounce on any misstep. And trying to salvage Apex would only lead to one place, court. The second decision came with fewer words. Motion to revoke all admin access associated with VP Lana Reiser, effective immediately. No debate. The CTO slid his tablet across the table to IT. Within seconds, Lana's badge pinged inactive in the system. She wouldn't know it yet, not until she tried to access the elevator. Maybe not until she got back to her office and found her login rejected, but it was done. Then, a quiet but purposeful shuffle of papers. Karen from legal passed around a newly drafted memo titled, IP Attribution Update, Apex Logic Framework. Inside, it detailed, without fanfare, that the core intellectual property once dubbed Apex had been traced to former employee Judith A. Harlow. It included a statement of acknowledgement, dated and signed by both legal and compliance, and requested that all internal documentation reflect this correction moving forward. It didn't say her name with reverence, just with certainty, and that was more than enough. 2 floors below, someone was updating the internal wiki. Another was pushing a memo to PR, drafted with the usual corporate vagueness. We thank all contributors for their efforts and remain committed to ethical innovation. But the real fire started off-site. A freelance tech journalist, one I'd spoken to off the record 2 weeks prior, published the piece before lunch. Ex-engineer outsmarts employer in patent surprise. How one woman's documentation took down a flagship product. It wasn't sensational. It didn't need to be. The headline alone was enough. My inbox exploded. By 2 p.m., I had 4 recruiter messages with the subject line saw the article eyes and one from a startup CTO that read, if you're even thinking of doing this again, I want in. My LinkedIn lit up like a slot machine on Red Bull. Likes, shares, reshares. People I hadn't heard from in years were commenting, tagging, reaching out with congratulations dressed up as curiosity. Even Darla messaged me, holy hell, you really did it. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even proud. Just still, because vindication doesn't always come with champagne or applause. Sometimes it shows up in an edited org chart, in a deactivated badge, in silence that wraps around a room full of men who thought they'd never have to learn your name. I went for a walk that afternoon, left my phone at home, grabbed a coffee from the place that always oversteeps their tea, and sat on a bench watching squirrels fight over stale French fries. Somewhere across town, the same board that once erased me was now rewriting internal documentation with my name in bold. Lana's chair? It would be gone by morning. But mine? They never even realized it had been stolen, until I took it back. The badge was heavier than I expected. Not literally, of course, just symbolically. Clean silver rectangle with Viron Labs etched into the bottom corner and my name above it. Judith A. Harlow, Chief Patent Officer. The receptionist smiled like she'd been told to expect me. She pointed me toward the elevator bank, which opened with a quiet ding and a rush of lemon-scented air conditioning. The building was all glass and clean lines, designed to feel like the future, like something you could trust with secrets and capital. And for the first time in over a decade, I walked into a workplace that wanted me because of what I'd built, not in spite of it. Viron wasn't a startup, not exactly. They were lean but lethal, focused, run by people who understood IP wasn't some box to check, it was the foundation. They'd courted me after the article dropped, made it clear they didn't just want my name on paper. They wanted my system, my discipline, my foresight. It gave me my own floor, not a whole one, but enough of one. A glass-walled suite with a view of the skyline and a quiet hum of servers in the background. First order of business, setting up a patent review protocol so no one in that building ever made the same mistake Alarix did. I hadn't brought much with me. Just the usual, laptop, legal pads, a single framed photo of me, and Ravi eating soft pretzels in grad school. At exactly 9 o'clock a.m., I opened my inbox. 15 NDA forms waiting for my review. 3 internal product proposals with flagged dependencies. A welcome email from the founder titled simply, "Let's build smarter." Across town, same morning, Alarix's new product team was prepping their fallback demo. A stripped-down, less visionary version of Apex they were calling Route IQ. It was supposed to be simple, safe, stripped of anything that could trace back to me. Except it wasn't, because as they ran the sandbox environment, something unexpected happened. The load balancer refused to initialize. A backend authentication module threw a red flag. A third-party API call failed without explanation. All of it traced back to core files they thought they'd scrubbed. But they hadn't, because those dependencies weren't just referenced in Apex. They were buried in it, protected by provisional filings, tagged with code headers that now carried a trademarked namespace. Harlow Routing v1, some poor engineer, probably Byron, bless him, clicked into one of the failed modules and found a note in the header, #Harlow protocol do not modify without written authorization. The panic came quickly. Git commit history locked. File access restricted. Licensing checkers auto-triggered. I opened the repo history and saw it. Every attempt to rebuild without my original logic caused conflicts. Every shortcut, broken, every patch, fragile, because they hadn't built around my work. They'd built on it, and without me it collapsed. I heard about it an hour later secondhand through a Slack message forwarded by a recruiter who said, "Thought you'd appreciate this." Screenshot attached. One line stood out. From a senior engineer I'd never even met. She wasn't joking. "We built this on her work." I sipped my coffee. Colombian dark roast, splash of oat milk, no sugar. Then I opened my browser, clicked through to the morning headlines, and there it was. Alarix retreats from Route IQ launch amid licensing concerns. Sources say IP ownership dispute at center of collapse. It didn't say my name this time. It didn't have to, because anyone paying attention already knew. I smiled, quiet, slow, then whispered just to myself, "They finally realized I was the product." Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.